Morning. Looks like we're finally supposed to break through this incredibly cold temperature we've had in the last week, but for this morning, we're still a bit in the deep freeze. Generally, I wouldn't be quite this much of a glutton for punishment, but I haven't been out in a while, so I figured I'd get a good hike in. This is probably why, though, I don't expect my through hike to be starting in February, and I'm aiming for March. But those of you who are starting early, as well as those of you that are already out there, my hat goes off to you. I will be watching from the warmth of my fireplace. So today you'll notice I'm dressed a little bit differently. This won't be any gear I'm taking on my hike, but you gotta battle the cold somehow. So actually, I don't know if this qualifies as a shakedown hike if you're not actually taking what you anticipate taking. The segues actually into today's topic. I'm going to talk about my shakedown hikes and lessons learned. It's almost as if I planned this. Let's get started. So in my humble and granted novice opinion, one of the most important things beyond the physical and mental training that I think a greenhorn should do in preparation for a through hike is shakedown hikes. The shakedown hikes allow you to really dial in your gear and also give you a sense of what to expect. It's the education part of my hikeification. So I have been doing these hikes since about the late spring of last year. And I've probably got about 300 miles now on with a full pack. And I've hiked in the rain and the snow and the sun and the heat, so I've got a pretty good perspective on a whole variety of conditions. Typically my hikes have been longer day hikes, although I have done some overnighters, with the longest being a 4-day jaunt. And because most of my hikes are on weekends where I can't do overnighters, I did try to do back-to-back longer day hikes just to get a little bit of feel for the rigors it puts onto the body. Mostly I've hiked in my local trails, but also sections of the Bruce Trail here in Ontario, as well as the Algonquin Provincial Park. On the camping side of the equation, I'd say I'm probably a little less proficient, a little less comfortable. So despite spending a lot of nights out in the backyard to the point where my neighbors are starting to question my lifestyle, I'm sure, and the aforementioned overnighters, when I hit the Appalachian Trail, the camping side is still going to be a bit of a wing and a prayer. And through it all, I've gained a sense of who I am as a hiker. I've gained a sense of my abilities, my attitude, and my gear. I've gained confidence in my gear choices and made adaptations and changes as we went. Mostly I've got comfortable with being uncomfortable. I've treated these shakedown hikes as my classroom. And after every hike I would do that introspective analysis and really brutally critique what worked and what didn't, and make subsequent changes next time out. And so I do want to take an opportunity to share with you some of my learnings. Welcome to my hikeification. So here we go, a random sampling of lessons learned from my shakedown hikes. Sit back, grab your favorite beverage, for it's story time. Picture, if you will, the first time using a bear bag. Our protagonist, aka me, will claim absolutely no expertise on the use of the bear bag at this juncture. And those early throws of trying to get the rock bag over the tree limb were a bit of a comedy of error. Pro tip Forget what you hear about the underhand toss. It's all about the sidearm. Trust me. It was my first night on a multi-day trip in Algonquin Provincial Park. This expansive, rugged wilderness in Ontario. And I was doing a 3-day loop, and I was about 20 miles out on the first day from the trailhead. Hadn't seen a soul the entire day. Hadn't had cell reception since the first mile. As part of the ritual of setting up camp at the end of the first day, despite my day one exhaustion, I, like a good diligent backpacker, strung my bear bag from the tree. Now granted, it took a lot of throws, but I got it up there without incident. And I did the PCT style. So a quick overview of the PCT style of bear hanging. Essentially, you throw your line over the limb of a tree, and you take the end of that line and you attach it to the carabiner that's attached to your food bag. You then take the back part of the line and also run it through the carabiner. You then pull on the line, your bear bag goes up, stops just under the branch of the tree. You then proceed to take that back part of the line, attach a stick or a toggle to it. Then as you release it, the toggle goes up, the bear bag comes down, and that stick gets caught on the carabiner, so it kind of free hangs halfway. Clear as mud. Fast forward to later that night. It's pitch black as the thunderstorms are starting to roll in. Sunset is now a distant memory. All that's left from my fire is a few remaining embers, so the glow from my headlamp is the only thing left that I can see. And I go to prepare for bed. And the last thing I do is I take my ditty bag, which has some of the scented items that I was using for that evening, and I go attach it to my food bag. And the nice thing about the PCT style is you can just lower that toggle, attach a ditty bag to that, and then as you release it, it goes up and it meets the food bag halfway. At least that's what happens on every YouTube video I've seen. So I go forth. I pull on that stick, I attach the ditty bag in top of it, and I release it with the expectation they're going to meet in the middle. Only nothing happens. The food bag remains firmly just under that branch. The ditty bag doesn't move. What follows is about 10 minutes of panicked line jostling, trying to maneuver that bag and somehow bring it down. I'm convinced the lines have somehow got inextricably caught up in the carabiner, and it's stuck there. And from the limited condensance of my headlamp, I can't see what's going on. So I end up leaving it there, knowing that I'll have to address it in the morning in the light of the day. So the lesson and the moral of the story is not just about the food bag. It's also about trying to clear up any unresolved issues before you go to sleep, for that was probably the worst night of sleep I can ever recall having. My mind was fixated on what would I do if I couldn't get that food bag down. Could I somehow MacGyver my knife to the end of my trekking pole with duct tape and cut open the bag and get the food coming down like a piñata? Or maybe I could Spider-Man up the tree and shimmy across the limb like a 9-year-old on a playground jungle gym and grab my food bag. Could I build a little cairn of some sort and be able to reach it? These are things that your mind goes through at 1 o'clock in the morning when it gets fixated. I was convinced I wasn't going to be able to get my food. Would I have to go back to the trailhead the next day and end this 4-day hike early? When would I be able to get back out? Could I actually hike 20 miles without food? No breakfast, no lunch? I mean, sure, I'm not going to starve to death, but ugh. So these thoughts, So these thoughts negated any hope of sleep through the evening. Turns out, fast forward to the next day, bear bag was fine. Now granted, I am going to purchase one of those locking carabiners because I've subsequently done some research and found lines can get tangled in them and they can get stuck in a tree. But what happened with me was the laws of physics just took hold. Turns out my ditty bag was a little heavier than I thought. And the difference between the ditty bag and the bare bag was not enough to overcome the friction on the line over the tree. As soon as I detached the ditty bag, down came the food bag. Something I wish I would have figured out the night before. Lesson learned. So it turns out I sweat. I sweat a lot. I sweat in the sun, I sweat in the heat, I sweat in the rain, I sweat in the cold, I sweat in the snow. And sweating a lot brings up a whole host of lessons. The first is chafing. Yes, I am about to open the metaphorical kimono and talk about that should not be talked about. More specifically, butt chafing. So it's June 18th and I'm undertaking a 15-mile hike with a full bag, the thermometer pushing 30 degrees Celsius, which for my American friends means it's pretty hot. I'm drenched to the point where I've already wrung out my shirt 5 times. And any casual bystander I pass on the trail would not be completely out of line to assume that I had just jumped into a big pool of water somewhere. The thing about sweating excessively everywhere is you think, hey, I'm soaking. Shouldn't water have some basic lubrication principles? Turns out, no. You see, sweat has salt. And as sweat dries, those little tiny salt crystals get left behind. And those little tiny salt crystals have little tiny abrasive properties. Like little tiny micro sandpaper rubbing where you have skin-to-skin contact. This accentuates any chafing that you may be predisposed to. Something a novice hiker like myself maybe wouldn't be aware of. So here I am, hiking and sweating and hiking without the principles of chafing coming to mind, and ignoring what started as a mere mild discomfort through the course of the day. Fast forward to the punchline. What followed was a week of, let's just say, walking bow-legged. Enough said. Such an experience cements the importance of the pre-body glide application, as well as cleaning with wet wipes periodically through the course of the day. And I share this not to leave you running from my YouTube channel, but to heed my warning. This is one lesson you might want to not to discover for yourself, for it's a mistake I'm not soon to repeat. Although, if there is a silver lining, if I had to learn a tough love lesson, I much prefer to learn it in a shakedown hike in the summer of last year versus on the Appalachian Trail. So, sweating in the cold creates another problem. I've heard people say start your hike out cold, but it never really registered. I thought about it in terms of the aggravation factor. You know, to be 30 minutes into your hike and start getting a little bit warm and have to stop and take your backpack off and take off a layer to continue on your hike. So here it is, just before Christmas. I have an 18-mile hike planned, so it's cold, and I start off really fast, really get that blood circulating. And before long, I'm sweating. And initially when you're moving, it's nice because as sweat meets the cold wind, it cools you off a little bit. What's not so nice is when you stop, as the thermometer starts to plummet and the cold takes hold. It was minus 10 degrees out and my lunch break was cut very short for, I didn't even get through a power bar before the intense cold from the wet shirt really started to sap all the heat out of me. The vibrato of my shivering started to become noticeable already. I'm thankful I was just doing a day hike. I couldn't imagine, with the weather continuing to get colder and colder by the hour, what it would have been like to have to camp out in that, being wet and not being able to warm up despite actually putting more layers on. I was lucky in that I got to go home to a hot bath, and what was uncomfortable wasn't dangerous, but it could very well be. So that shakedown hike taught me to really be cognizant of my pace, of how hard I'm pushing, especially in the winter conditions. Past that, on a positive, through the various shakedown hikes, I have learned that in the most extreme winter conditions, my layering system does work. I've been able to stay pretty warm and adapt the layers as necessary. You may recall in my gear video, I was questioning whether I would need to take my Mountain Equipment Co-op running tights. The answer to that is a definite yes, for the Prana Stretch Zion pants are very thin, and I am prone to cold butt syndrome. So my inherent hiking style has evolved. I've learned I have a tendency to be very destination oriented. When I start in the morning, I want to continue straight through until I reach that endpoint that I'm shooting for. I don't stop for the breaks that I should probably do. And that's not the type of hike that I want nor need to do when I hit the Appalachian Trail. So I need to pace myself more, force myself to make breaks until it becomes more habitual. Fake it till you make it, if you will. And an offshoot of not taking breaks as much as you should is I also tend to not hydrate as much as I probably should. The combination of being tired and lack of hydration can actually be a recipe for disaster. And I discovered this on that same Algonquin trip. It was the end of the second day and I was pushing hard most of the day. I hadn't taken the breaks I should have, and I definitely didn't hydrate as much as I should have. And the combination of that means you're a little bit less attentive. Combine that with some steep uphills and downhills, a lot of leaves on the ground from the fall, as well as rain, made for some very slippery conditions. And slippery conditions and lack of attention means I fell. I actually fell 3 times, and I had never fallen previously. And the last fall, that last fall was one of those scary falls. The legs fly out from under you, you land on your shoulder, bang your head type falls. Not the type of fall where you bounce back up and you look around more embarrassed than hurt. The only thing potentially hurt is your ego. No, this is one of those falls where you lay on the ground and you stay still and you wait and you let the adrenaline slowly dissipate and then gradually do the check to see how badly you're hurt. Luckily, I was just a little battered and bruised, but it could have been a lot worse. It definitely puts things into perspective when you're 20 miles away from the nearest point of civilization, no cell contact, and wondering what you would do. I'm all about taking risks, but I'm about taking calculated risks. And I acknowledge that there is a potential my Appalachian Trail through hike could end because of injury. And I can't negate all the risks, but I definitely can minimize it. And keeping track of my pace, keeping track of my hydration and how tired I am is one lesson from the shakedown hikes that I will fully adapt when I hit the trail. Benefits of the shakedown hike is innumerable. Off the top of my head, a couple quick hits. My hammock, love it, although I do wish I had a little bit more time to figure out some of those fiddle factors. My camera and my vlogging, baby steps. I would say the videos are getting better video over video, but that is going to be a long learning curve. And my gear, it's coming along. I've made a lot of refinements. I'll share some of those subsequent little tweaks here before I do depart, but I would say for all intents and purposes, I'm happy with the choices I made. But mostly what the shakedown hikes have taught me is confidence. Those missteps notwithstanding. What's the phrase? See one, do one, teach one? Well, it's very easy to watch YouTube videos and say, hey, it's just walking, how hard can it be? But the shakedown hikes are my do one. And there's been some good lessons learned. And by no means would I claim to have even a modicum of expertise at this point. But what I have is confidence in my ability to adapt. And this is anything I take with me on the Appalachian Trail through the shakedown hikes, it's going to be that. And I think that adaptability will be what gets me through. So here we are, 60 days out. And at this point, while I'll still have more hikes, I'm moving from the shakedown hikes to real core endurance training to build up the stamina so that I don't just survive those first couple weeks, but I actually enjoy them when I hit the trail. If you enjoy these videos, feel free to like and subscribe. Till next time, hike on.